Hi, I'm Glenn Everett, Master of Machines. Wow, Buzz, what do we have here? What's this area?
This is the Hall of Honor. It's really the heart of the facility. This is where our 5 inductees are enshrined each year. And as you can see, it was designed in a circle so that nobody gets put in a corner. Each inductee gets a platform for one of their cars that's related to their career. They also get a glass case for memorabilia and artifacts from their career. And they also get a spire. Now, we didn't want the traditional bust or the plaque like other halls of fame. We wanted to be a little different. So we came up with this idea of a spire, and it kind of encapsulates their entire career with audio and video and statistics. And at the end of their year, like next January when we bring the new class in, we'll take this spire off of this mount and we'll mount it on the exterior wall, and that'll be a permanent part of the Hall of Honor. So we have enough room for 20 years of inductees, and at the end of 20 years, I don't know what we're going to do, but we'll figure out something.
And whilst we're here, Buzz, I've noticed a very famous name, Fireball Roberts.
Indeed.
Tell us about this car.
This car is really one of the icons of the sport. This was a very interesting story here. You had Fireball Roberts, who was a Daytonan. The car was built by Smokey Yunick, who lived in Daytona. It was sponsored by Stevens Pontiac, which was a local Pontiac dealer, all Daytona effort. And Fireball went out and won every single race he ever entered at Daytona Speedway in 1962. All the qualifiers, sat on the pole, won the Daytona 500, won the Firecracker 250 in July. He was the first driver to ever sweep an entire track's season of events. So he really was a groundbreaker too. He was one of the first guys to become a household name. People who didn't really know much about the sport knew the name Fireball. Very colorful guy, very classy too, very media savvy, great athlete in his own right. And he was a tremendous benefit to the sport.
So with this car, not only did you have the driver talent of Fireball Roberts behind the wheel, but you also had a very innovative car builder in Smokey Yunick behind the vehicle itself.
It was a perfect combination. And you know who was kind of an unsung hero on that whole Pontiac high performance deal back in the early 60s? Yeah, they dominated NASCAR racing on the big tracks from 1959 to about 1962. But John DeLorean from the
Really?
great, yes, he was the whiz kid with General Motors who was in charge of the performance division of Pontiac. So his name hardly ever surfaces, but he was one of the guys that was behind this whole program.
Now, for the viewers, Smokey Yunick was incredibly innovative, wasn't he? He always thought outside the square, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he could not be restricted by rules or by, parameters or whatever. He was always coming up with something new. He would think of things that I don't know where it came from. It's like, this could never possibly work, but it worked.
And I believe that the manufacturers actually used him for a lot of R&D, a lot of testing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was definitely, if you were a manufacturer, you wanted Smokey on your side. I remember his late wife, Patty, told me back in the early 70s that General Motors had him on the payroll for, it was a pretty sizable chunk of money. She said he didn't really have to do anything, but they just wanted to make sure he was on their team. I'd like to be like that when I grow up.
Yeah. So tell us about this car here, Buzz.
Yes, this car was driven to the 1952 NASCAR champion by Tim Flock. He was one of 3 brothers and a sister that raced. This is actually a replica of the real car. The real one was lost years ago, but it is an exact duplicate of what Tim Flock drove in 52, and then he drove it in 53. Now, if you look on the other side of the roof, you'll see the name Jocko Flocko. You wonder, well, who's Jocko Flocko and why 2 names on the roof? It turns out that Tim Flock had a live rhesus monkey ride with him as co-pilot for 8 races in 1953. It's the only time in NASCAR history that a co-pilot or 2 people were in a car. And poor old Jocko, he got out of his seat at a race up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Tim was running second, which paid $1,800. And Jocko, he was just going crazy inside the car, and Tim had to make what he called a monkey stop. It wasn't a pit stop, it was a monkey stop. Had to throw the monkey over to his crew chief, got back in the car, finished third. They only paid $1,200. He said, the darn monkey cost me $600 and there was going to be no more monkey in the race car. A little bit of NASCAR folklore there.
Amazing, I've never heard of such a thing. Now we're talking.
Yes.
Plymouth Superbird and the big 426 Hemi.
Now, when you talk about American muscle, it doesn't get any better than this. This is incredible. This was a factory-based car. This car was produced by Chrysler Corporation, and it was their answer to Ford in the Aero Wars of 1969-1970. It had that long, slopey front nose on it. It had the scoops on the fenders to release any air pressure that might have built up. It had the gigantic wing on the back. And I've talked to several drivers who actually competed with these, and they said, I said, how good was that car? He said, well, he says, if you're driving a race car that you cannot spin out, that's pretty good. He said it was almost impossible to spin this car out. And combined with the 426 Hemi, it was just a bear. And Pete Hamilton, who was a driver from Massachusetts, fairly new on the circuit. He was the team driver to Richard Petty, and he won the Daytona 500 with this car and then went on to win both races at Talladega Superspeedway. And it was huge for him, it was huge for Chrysler, and it's just, you'll never see these days again.
An old school workshop, Buzz.
Indeed, yeah, this is where magic was made back in the late 1940s. Red Vogt, who was the guru of all race engine builders back in the day, this was a recreation of a corner of his shop that's set on Marietta Street in Atlanta, Georgia. This was about the state of the art back in the day. Nothing fancy, very utilitarian, and you can see his engine stand, and he's got these were jack stands of the day, and you have a bead breaker for breaking your tires off of your rims. Really, really neat stuff. This was actually designed by a couple of fellows who used to work in the shop back in the 1940s when they were kids just out of high school. So this is a great, great representation of what Red Vogt shop was. It didn't get any better than this.
Well, Buzz, here's a famous car, and a car that was very dominant for quite some period.
Oh yes, the 1956 Chrysler 300. Tim Flock started the season in 1956 driving this car for Mr. Kiekhaefer, and then they had a falling out. Buck Baker took over the ride, and Buck won the 1956 championship with a car just like this. This is a replica, and what we did on here, we really wanted to show the differences between a street car of the day and a race car of the day. So we found this car in California, and we sent it up to Petty's garage. Richard Petty and his crew restored it for us. And yeah, Richard's father raced one of these. So Richard he kind of made this one of his own little pet projects, more or less. And on this side, you can see where you've got a roll bar, and you've got the lettering on the side, you've got wide wheels. And then if you go around to the other side of the car, you can see the street version. And other than some cosmetics, there wasn't a lot of difference. You can see the white wall tires, you can see the full front seat, and it's got the headlight in it and all that sort of thing. So we felt like this was a very good graphic example to show the folks exactly what the car of 1956 was all about.
And the Mercury outboard team were extremely dominant, weren't they?
Oh yeah.
Annihilated everything, didn't they?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah, very, very strong. 1956 and the 1955 season also. Tim Flock won the 1955 championship. So they had back-to-back championships with this team. And Mr. Kiekhaefer was way ahead of his time. He had everyone dressed up in the same uniform. He had big trucks that carried the cars to the races. I mean, back in those days, some of the guys were actually driving their race cars to the track. And then, of course, if they wrecked them, how are they going to get home?
Now, was he the owner of Mercury Outboard?
Yeah, he was the inventor of the Mercury Outboard engine.
Wow.
And he felt that NASCAR was a great way to advertise his product. So he was so far advanced over the traditional thinking of the sport back in those days. He
Businessman.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, and then by the end of the 1956 season, he realized that there were no more worlds to conquer in NASCAR, so he moved on to another project.
Tell us a little bit about the moonshine element with some of the races.
Rumor had it that some of the early NASCAR competitors were involved in the transportation of untaxed adult beverages, aka moonshine. And they were outrunning the law. If they got caught, they were going to jail. If they got beat on Sunday at a little local dirt track, no big deal, they lost a race. But if they got caught on the road, they were in deep trouble. So they had to learn how to modify their cars to get the best performance, the best handling characteristics, all this. And most of the early technology was actually developed on the back roads of North Georgia, North Carolina, of these enterprising young men outrunning the law.
And tell us about the entity that NASCAR is today. It's grown into an enormous lifestyle, basically, hasn't it, really, as far as the size of NASCAR?
The high-performance automotive industry in North Carolina is a $5 billion a year industry just in the state of North Carolina. not just from the race teams, but the different companies that supply the products and develop products and all that. They ran the first race in February 1948, and there's been no looking back. It was tremendous because the average person can relate, because that car on that racetrack is just like the one that I drive. So over the years, American automotive manufacturers have used NASCAR for a research and development platform, and a lot of the innovations that are in the average passenger car today were developed through NASCAR. Better brakes, better tires, stronger, lighter metals, better aerodynamics, better fuel mileage. Whether the average citizen realizes it or not, NASCAR has been a very important part of their life.
Buzz, thank you so much for showing us around the NASCAR Hall of Fame. It's been an amazing experience.
Well, thank you. It was indeed my pleasure, and we're honored to have you here. And if I ever get to Australia, I would expect the same out of you.
Thank you very much. You got it.
Yeah, you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Buzz.
If you missed part 1, click this episode link to see more of this amazing collection. And please like, comment and subscribe to help us keep this show on the road.